today I'm going to be walking you around my garden, talking through various aspects of it. So the garden is predominantly, or most of all the borders are predominantly made up of a combination of shrubs and perennials, and I'm always sort of really interested with foliage, texture and colour, but also using sort of different forms of structural planting to create a backbone to the garden. I have to say at this point, I mean, all the plants that I like to use and I experiment with really do need to look after each other, or not look after each other, look after themselves with as minimal fuss and attention as possible. Just to start with, we have this lovely group of prestigiate yew. We call them the Gabbs, which are a form of structural planting, but in a really informal way that creates a lovely contrast through the seasons. We have a sea of snowdrops that obviously start at the beginning of the year and then go through into the daffodil season, and then we just let the grasses all grow up around them, and we get wonderful setting sun that backlights all the grass seed heads and make a wonderful contrast against the solidity of these yew columns. Now I'm going to sort of pan around, trying not to make you all feel too sick. And again, we have a sort of continuation of a combination of structural planting. Here we've actually used Cotoneaster as a topiary plant, which works brilliantly. You can see it definitely is in need of a haircut. It's not nearly as sharp as it normally is, but with the fantastic little sort of white flowers that the bees really absolutely can't get enough of, followed by then the fantastic sort of winter colour and then the red berries. It's great to have a piece of topiary that actually provides a number of different seasonal interests rather than just staying exactly the same throughout the year. I love my grasses as well. Another interesting thing is that the Steeper gigantea has flowers a lot shorter than it normally would, which means it's managing to stand up against the wind that we've had. But I think this must have been due to the very, very hot sort of spring and early summer that we had. So just carrying on across the front of the house, I'm just going to pan around and show you how then this more formal and symmetrical structural planting off the front of the house creates this wonderful, very sort of calm space within what was two old tennis courts many years ago. And we use beech for all of the cubes that you can see around the space, which again look great through the winter. So you have again a double sort of seasonal interest with the great sort of copper coloured winter colour that they have. And some rather unusual shaped yew pieces on the corners of this formal pond, which are I suppose a pyramid on the outside two sides and a semicircle on the third side to mirror the shape of the pond. I'm not 100% sure how much I really like them, but they do just fit really well, and they're certainly different anyway. So I'm just going to now take you across the front of the house so that you can just see how the structural planting really mirrors the symmetry of the house, which is completely square in its footprint, and this very simple structural planting is a wonderful sort of backbone to creating a space within the larger space on this lower terrace lawn. I'll just And keep the camera steady, just get a full perspective of how this all looks from a distance. And then here we have, this is a small patch of wildflower meadow. I established a whole load of yellow rattle into the lawn, which has actually done extremely well. We have a lot of yellow rattle seed, which you can see all the way through the lawn here. It's been really successful. So this autumn, when we've cut it again, we will then be sowing lots of native wildflowers into the lawn, and hopefully with the yellow rattle being a parasite to the grass or on the grass, it weakens the grass enough so that the wildflowers have enough of a chance to obviously establish themselves. So we're just heading up now to, I suppose, our most used formal lawn. Here we have again another space defined by these wonderful bleached lime trees, which again have been here for must be 35 years since they were planted. I've underplanted them with these box cubes, which obviously just adds to the punctuation of the planting, and actually they're really good at stopping the bleached limes from suckering from the bottom, which seemed to be another job that needed doing before we had the box cubes. But since we put them in, those suckers seem to be massively reduced, which is really handy. We have a couple of very small parterres. I think this is about as fiddly as our formal planting gets in this garden. And again, this is a combination of berberis, a miniature form of berberis, obviously the buxus, where we got blights a couple of years ago, so we had to rip out all the buxus and I replanted it, and obviously the lavender as well. So just heading up now to our main terrace. This terrace was only laid about 3 years ago, and it's beginning to settle in. It certainly was a bit bright when it was brand new, and this border is a fairly constantly changing planting scheme. There's a few things that stay in here sort of year round, from the hydrangea incredible, which is absolutely one of my favourites that I seem to use a lot. Again, it has these wonderful sort of pale lime green buds that open to these amazing great big white domes, and then these actually follow through the winter with a really good cinnamon coloured seed head, which seem to last even in the worst of winters. They really do last well. And this year I have got particularly into using oranges in this border. We have a rather nice rose called Meg on this wall, which in bud is quite orange, and with that I planted a lot of Geum totally tangerine, which we have obviously deadheaded, and we're just getting a second spray now of flowers coming up, but along with a fairly shocking pink erodium, which is here, and the Libertia grandiflora, which flowers in June. This border with, it's quite an unusual combination. You could say it's rather technicolor at times of the year, but anyway, it's somewhere that I have a lot of fun. And we have climbing up the house this old Phygelius, which has got in up behind the wisteria and the roses, and it's just, well, it has pretty well gone over now, but it looks fabulous with a couple of clematises. I've got a couple of clematis Vegetella et al. Violet, which again have just finished. The roses sadly are over. Wisteria is having a little second flowering, and we have actually got one clematis that's a slightly later flowering Vegetella form, which is the Alba luxurians, which is this lovely white petal that has a very faint green splash through it as well. Along with that, obviously we've got a bit of stachys, Mexican daisies, the Artemisia Powers Castle. I think I might have mentioned, but this Miscanthus Morning Light, which has this lovely silvery effect as well. And again, they hold themselves up well during the winter, but obviously having browned off before they get chopped back very hard in the spring. And now just panning across, we can just have a little look down on top of these parterres, so you can see them a little bit better, and across the lime tree surrounded border. Actually, on the corner here we've got this. Here we have a plant of interest that you don't see very often. This is the Itea ilicifolia, and it has these fabulous long flower spikes, well, not spikes, flowers. I suppose similar in form to the catkins that you get on Agaria during the winter, but these have the most wonderful summer scent on them as well, or honey scent, and it's evergreen. And I find it's actually more known as a shrub, but when I've seen it grown as a shrub, the flowers seem to get all tangled up in the structure of the plant. So I've taken to growing it as a wall trained shrub, where you get this effect of the flowers sort of cascading down much better than you would as growing it as a free-form shrub. And this plant's been in here for about 4 years, but it's a tricky place. It gets the absolute brute force of the winds, and we do get quite strong winds up here. And I'm not quite sure what quality the soil is underneath it either, with the terrace right up to it. And then we've obviously got the Mexican daisy, the Erigeron carvenskianus, but that's one plant that's looking really good, and definitely is a lot happier settled into where it is. And actually another thing that I've grown that's really lasted well from last winter is the cup and saucer plant, the Cobaea candicans, I think. Cobaea, anyway, it's a Cobaea. And this has gone absolutely crazy. It has, you can see it's travelled all the way across the top of this climbing rose, and actually is all the way up at the top of the wisteria up there, and it's travelled all the way across to the middle of those windows there. And I have a feeling that will be getting quite a chop back this autumn stroke winter. Anyway, as we come around now, we're sort of going into the less formal parts of the garden, and I mean, I suppose all areas of this garden are constantly being sort of changed and revised, and plants are moved, and plants are lifted, and ideas changed. But again, we've got this sort of combination of shrubs and perennials, some obviously evergreen perennials with the phormiums. This time of year we've obviously got a lot of the hydrangeas are out. This is one that I planted about 3 years ago, which is the hydrangea fireworks, I think, firecracker, I think it's fireworks. And again with the lovely Perovskia, which looks fantastic with the Alchemilla mollis, which I know is a plant that not everybody loves because it's quite a rogue. But again, that acid green colour with the lovely sort of catmint purple colour of the Perovskia, I think is a wonderful combination. So just carrying on past that bed, we have Euphorbia mellifera, which you can see one sort of poking up over the top of the phormium there. Again, these have a wonderful sort of scented honey smelling flower as well. Really good, reliable evergreen. It's meant to be semi-hardy, but definitely had no problem with growing it here, and seems to even self-sow itself around the place. And there's somewhere else up in the garden where you'll see I'm doing a little bit of an experiment of plants that grow well under yew trees, which is a commonly known very tricky spot. And anyway, we'll be there in a minute, and I'll show you what other plants seem to be doing rather well there. Now, of course, we have obviously the one of the classic butterfly magnets, the Verbena bonariensis. And we have a couple of butterflies enjoying themselves. And we're just going to wander up now. I'm going to skip past the sunny side of the border, and this is a more established sort of winter woodland garden. Again, another sort of area of plants that I really have a passion for are ferns and hostas and epimediums. You can tell I obviously quite like my hydrangeas as well. And on this border on my right has been established for a good few years now, despite having a few things moved and changed and taken out here and there. But on this left side, this was only planted last autumn. We did take a couple of the ferns out of the right side and put them in here. And there's definitely a lot of things that we will be moving again this autumn. There's a bit of a few changes that we definitely want to make, but we've had some thalictrums that have been fantastic, and we've got this really tall thalictrum Ellen in the back that I'm really pleased did really well. We've got some nice hydrangea paniculata. We've got this little short one here, which is I think called Pinky Winky. And I think that one starts off white and then turns to a sort of deeper shade of pink. And then that's a lime green in the back there. We've had a nice Viburnum plicata mauricii, which has obviously done its business. Let's just scan across here. We've got the wonderful Actea, which is just coming into flower, formerly known as the Semicifuga. And they have a wonderful scent that will just be coming out, gosh, any minute by the looks of that flower stem there. The Aspleniums, Scolopendrium. I think this is a plant that's been here for years. I think it's called a Smilacina. It has lovely sort of white plumes out of the top, but that's always been very happy here. Even some of the hostas are doing really well. Just onto the ferns, I think just to mention a couple of my absolute favourite ferns. We have this is the Dryopteris cristata, the king, which has this really unusual sort of split ends to it. And then another fern that I really find is really interesting is the Dryopteris wallaceianum, that has these wonderful sort of dark spines running down each leaf, which just really stand out, and they're good evergreen ferns as well, so they usually get a good chop in very, very late winter, so that any slightly tired foliage from the winter is removed before the nice fresh new foliage comes in the spring. We've got some Lysimachia just coming into flower just here by this euonymus. Slightly rogue blue hydrangea there. I'm just going to wander around the back here. These are known as the hydrangea beds for obvious reasons. You'll be able to see this border, or that same border from the front. So this did actually have a quite a large tree with a rose growing up, and this bed was originally mostly in shade, but then unfortunately the tree completely died, and we took the rose out and moved it somewhere else, and so we now have a much sunnier bed. And again, this is another plant that I'd love to find, or I'd love to use, but it's really quite hard to find sometimes, and goes really well with the other silverleaf plants like the Miscanthus Morning Light. So this is the Eleagnus Quicksilver, which has a pretty nondescript flower, but the scent of it is absolutely phenomenal. So that's a June flowering Eleagnus. It's deciduous, but it has these incredible sort of aluminium-y silver leaves, and again that's definitely a real favourite of mine as well. So you can see the nice sort of combination of different coloured foliage, some more butterflies, nice sort of lime green of the Nicotiana, lime green, and it's just helps all. You can see how the Alchemilla and the Nicotiana and with the purple catmint just all keep a sort of similar flow of colours but with different textures. This is our sort of late summer border. Not to say it doesn't have any other interest in the year, because we have a rather nice Magnolia stellata, and there's a couple of the Philadelphus, the double flowering Philadelphus in the back, and obviously the Libertia, which flowers, excuse the hose pipe that's sticking up there. But this here we have a lot of Rudbeckias. We have also nice swathes of the Aster fricatii Munch, and of course this bed isn't quite fully out yet. So there are lots that's just about to come out. So we have quite hot colours. So from these sort of lovely burnt reds through to some sort of brighter yellows and more sort of coppery and burnt yellows, and they just look really good against this lovely purple leaf of the Cotinus grace, which is my favourite of the Cotinus plants. And again, we've got more Elaeagnus in the back. So this is, as you can see, as we get further from the house, the planting seems to get a little bit looser and looser. Actually, there's rather a nice view of the house from up here. So now you can see roughly where we've got to. Just do a little scan in that direction. And there's a lovely Daphne Odora Aurea marginata, and we've got various Sarcococcas as well. So we have lots of winter scent and winter flowers, but still there is, you know, we've got the choices, and again it's all very low maintenance sort of shrubs and perennials. Again, there's a few Philadelphus, the Viburnum, the hydrangeas. They've got the hydrangea paniculum limelight. Yeah, sorry, that other one back there wasn't lime green, it was called limelight. And then this here we have slightly wilted, it's quite a warm day, but the Brunnera Jack Frost, which is another absolute favourite plant of mine, particularly where you're trying to balance the silvery colours that you might be using on the sunny side of a garden, and you want to balance that foliage colour on a shadier side. And this Brunnera is one of the absolute best ones to be able to do that with. So carrying on now through this part of the garden, we're heading to Daffodil Corner, named obviously because we have an absolute sea of daffodils here in spring, in early spring. And then we can just scan back. So again, just looking at this garden from this end. So here we're now entering into the woodland walk, and we've been introducing a few plants here, sort of bit by bit, trying not to add more work to the amount of work that needs doing already. I've introduced a few acers down this walk. So we've got here the coral bark acer. We've had a really lovely sort of go with the Digitalis Pam's Choice, which have been excellent this year. We've got a few rhododendrons that we've planted, but they do need a bit of special treatment because we are predominantly on very heavy clay here. So any rhododendrons that we want to grow need obviously extra help to do well here. And also have been experimenting or introducing a few interesting bamboos, of which this little Barinza, which really struggled for the first couple of years. I'm now delighted to see these two lovely new stems shooting up, which is the best that's ever done. But we're just sort of establishing new parts of the garden, and always keeping maintenance in the back of our minds. And we're just approaching now the bog garden. So this is a slightly artificial bog garden in that pretty well all of the plants in here are not actually planted in the margins of the water. So this was a pond, but that sadly never seemed to fill up, and so the decision was made to fill it in with soil. And we have got just a small body of water, but done with a butyl liner. And again, this is another group of plants that I really just think is so exciting. They grow so rapidly, you get fantastic textures, and from obviously the big boys, as I call them, things like the gunnera, and then we've got the umbrella plant, the Darmera, which I'll show you in a minute, and then the wonderful Eupatorium, which is just coming into flower now with these sort of deep red coloured corymbs at the top. They're lovely, tall, straight, sort of deep spines as well. The Persicaria, that's Darjeeling red, looking very nice at this time of day with the light on it. Miscanthus silverfeather, again the contrast texturally with the gunnera works really well together. And a whole nother group of plants that I enjoy a lot, which are the Regiaceas. So again, you get these wonderful sort of corrugated leaves, like big hands. And then got another variety here. I can never remember which is which. I know that we've got one of them as a Superba. I think is this one the Podophylla, possibly. It might be the other way around. But anyway, you can just see how this really is quite a jungly part of the garden, and so that's what I love it for. Things beginning to wilt a little. It's getting quite warm now. Anyway, so as we just stepped through this sort of giant stepping stone path, you can just get a feel for all the wonderful different textures that we have in this garden. And we have a deck here. You can see the contained water. I mean, the poor gunners, because the water is just contained by a liner, so actually obviously all these, the gunneras and the that's the Darmera peltata, the umbrella plant that I was talking about, on the other side. We do have to, even though we have water coming in off the roofs, so we've got drainage pipes coming down underneath the ground, at least when it rains, all the water off these roofs comes down and waters these plants. But I have to say, we do have to get the sprinkler on here quite often, and you can see when the wind picks up, which it can do here, and it gets quite hot, the gunneras do tend to drop. You can see this definitely happened on the other side there. But I suppose there's no helping that if you've got trying to sort of do something slightly artificially as we are here. I hope that you've all really enjoyed this tour around the garden. Fabulous dragonflies I'm watching at the moment, and obviously lots of butterflies as well. Anyway, enjoy the rest of the show. I hope that everybody can donate whatever they can to the 5 charities that obviously the show is aiming to raise funds for, and enjoy the rest of the show. Thank you very much.